You won't believe what just happened. Wrestling Apocalypse. The most dominant alliance on Monday Night Raw just imploded in the most shocking and brutal way imaginable. Bron Breakker, the Intercontinental Champion and one half of Raw's most feared duo, just turned on his partner Bronson Reed with a vicious, calculated attack that has left the entire WWE Universe in absolute shock. This wasn't just a betrayal, this was a statement written in violence that nobody saw coming. We're breaking down every single detail of this stunning turn, what led to the breaking point, the psychology behind Bron's decision, and what this means for both superstars and the entire Raw landscape. Let's dive in. Before we get into this absolute chaos, if you're new to Wrestling Apocalypse, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we bring you the most comprehensive wrestling analysis and breakdowns you'll find anywhere. And if this betrayal has you as shocked as we are, hit that like button, it genuinely helps us grow this amazing community. Now, let's talk about how Bron Breakker just became the most ruthless superstar on Monday Night Raw. Wrestling Apocalypse. Before we dive into the betrayal, we need to understand just how dominant and seemingly unbreakable the partnership between Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed had become, because that makes this turn even more shocking. When these two powerhouses first aligned on Monday Night Raw, it felt like the wrestling gods themselves had created the perfect storm of destruction. Think about the combination: Bron Breakker, the second-generation athlete with explosive speed, devastating power, and that killer instinct that runs in his bloodline, paired with Bronson Reed, all 330 pounds of him, a super heavyweight who moves with the agility of someone half his size and possesses one of the most devastating finishing moves in all of WWE with his tsunami splash. Together, they were absolutely unstoppable. Over the past several weeks and months, this duo systematically dismantled every team and individual who dared to stand in their way. Tag teams that had been dominant on Raw were suddenly reduced to rubble after facing Bron and Reed. Singles competitors who challenged either man found themselves facing both, as the partnership watched each other's backs with what seemed like unwavering loyalty. The chemistry between them appeared genuine and natural. Both men share similar wrestling philosophies. They're power-based competitors who believe in physical dominance and making statements through devastating offense. When they stood side by side, they looked like an unstoppable force, a combined 600+ pounds of pure muscle and mayhem ready to destroy anyone in their path. Their entrance together became one of the most intimidating moments on Raw each week. The crowd would react with a mix of awe and concern, knowing that whoever was in the ring or scheduled to face them was about to experience serious pain. Bron would carry the championship, a symbol of his individual success, while Reed represented the dominant enforcer, the monster who made sure nobody got too close to his partner's title. What made this partnership particularly effective was how they complemented each other's strengths. Bron brought championship pedigree, explosive athleticism, and that devastating spear that could end matches in an instant. Reed brought size, surprising agility for a man his weight, and that tsunami splash that had put away countless opponents. When these two combined their arsenals, opponents had nowhere to hide. Escape Bron's speed and you'd run into Reed's power, avoid Reed's size and you'd get caught by Bron's explosiveness. The WWE Universe was divided on this alliance. Some fans appreciated the sheer spectacle of watching two monsters dominate the roster. Others were concerned that this partnership was creating an imbalance on Raw where nobody could legitimately compete with them. Both reactions were valid because this team genuinely seemed unbeatable when they worked together. Backstage segments showed what appeared to be genuine camaraderie. Bron and Reed would strategize together, celebrate victories together, and present a united front to anyone who challenged them. There were no obvious cracks in the foundation, no visible signs of tension or conflict. To the outside observer, this was a partnership built to last and dominate for years to come. But as we're about to discuss, beneath that surface of dominance and unity, there were subtle tensions building, tensions that would eventually explode in the most brutal way imaginable. Now, Wrestling Apocalypse, let's rewind and examine the warning signs we should have noticed, because while this betrayal felt sudden and shocking, there were actually subtle hints that something wasn't quite right in this partnership. The first cracks appeared during their most recent matches and confrontations. While they were still winning and dominating, there were small moments, brief flashes where you could see ego and individual ambition beginning to creep into the partnership. In their tag team matches, there were instances where both men would go for the pin simultaneously, each wanting to be the one to secure the victory. These moments were brief and easily explained away as competitive fire, but they represented something deeper: the desire to be the dominant force rather than simply a dominant force. Bron's status as Intercontinental Champion created an inherent imbalance in the partnership. Championships matter in WWE, they represent success, validation, and hierarchy. Bron held a prestigious title, which gave him a certain status that Reed, despite being equally dominant in their partnership, didn't possess. This dynamic was sustainable only as long as Reed felt he was on the path to his own championship glory. Recent interviews with both men revealed subtle tensions in their perspectives. When asked about the partnership, Bron would emphasize his role as champion first, then mention the partnership almost as an afterthought. His identity was clearly tied to being the champion rather than being part of a duo. Reed, meanwhile, would talk about the partnership's dominance but increasingly mention his individual goals and aspirations for championship gold. There was a particularly telling moment about 2 weeks ago during a backstage segment. Bron was being interviewed about his next championship defense when Reed walked into frame. The interviewer asked Reed about supporting Bron's title reign, and Reed's response was carefully worded but revealing, "I support excellence, and I expect the same support when my time comes for championship opportunities." That phrase, "when my time comes," carried weight. It suggested Reed was waiting for something, expecting something, and that his patience might not be infinite. During their matches, there were also moments where Bron would tag himself in when Reed had an opponent in a vulnerable position, taking the glory of the finish for himself. Or instances where Reed would dominate an opponent only for Bron to deliver the final spear and secure the victory. These weren't controversial at the time, they were just wrestling, but in hindsight, they represented Bron positioning himself as the star of the partnership while Reed increasingly felt like the supporting player. The breaking point appeared to be building around championship opportunities. Bronson Reed had been vocal about deserving a shot at championship gold, whether that was the championship or another title opportunity that would give him equal status to Bron. WWE management's decisions about title opportunities also seemed to favor Bron. When championship matches were announced, Bron's intercontinental title defenses received prominent positioning and promotion. Reed's opportunities, while present, weren't given the same level of importance. From Reed's perspective, this might have felt like being stuck in his partner's shadow despite being equally dominant. The most significant warning sign came in their most recent tag team match, which took place just days before the betrayal. During that match, there was a miscommunication where Bron tagged himself in at a crucial moment, potentially preventing Reed from executing his tsunami splash and securing the victory. Reed's facial expression after that moment was telling, not angry, exactly, but frustrated, disappointed, and perhaps beginning to question whether this partnership was serving his interests. After that match, backstage cameras caught a brief interaction between the two. Bron was celebrating the victory enthusiastically while Reed stood slightly apart, his body language noticeably cooler. When Bron approached to celebrate together, Reed's response was measured, restrained. The enthusiasm that had characterized their earlier interactions was noticeably diminished. All of these signs pointed to a partnership that was fraying at the edges, held together more by success and momentum than by genuine unity or shared purpose. The question wasn't if the partnership would end, it was when, and how brutal that ending would be. Now, Wrestling Apocalypse, let me walk you through the betrayal moment by moment, because what Bron Breakker did to Bronson Reed was absolutely devastating and completely unexpected in its timing and brutality. Monday Night Raw was building toward a major segment where Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed were scheduled to address the Raw roster and make a statement about their continued dominance. The setup appeared straightforward: two dominant superstars cementing their position at the top of Raw's hierarchy. The segment began with both men making their entrance together, the championship prominently displayed on Bron's shoulder. The crowd's reaction was mixed, as always, some appreciation for their dominance, some concern about their continued destruction of the roster. They walked to the ring with that same intimidating presence that had characterized their partnership, showing no obvious signs of conflict or tension. Once in the ring, Bronson Reed grabbed a microphone and began speaking. His promo was focused on their dominance, their victories, and their intention to continue running Raw exactly as they saw fit. Reed spoke with confidence and authority, clearly comfortable in his role as one of Raw's top superstars. He talked about how nobody on the roster could match their combination of size, power, and intensity. Then Reed did something that, in hindsight, was the trigger for what followed. He began talking about championship opportunities, not just defending Bron's Intercontinental Championship, but about his own aspirations for gold. Reed made it clear that he believed his dominance in their partnership had earned him the right to challenge for championships, to be recognized as not just Bron's partner but as a championship-caliber superstar in his own right. The camera cut to Bron's face during this part of Reed's promo, and you could see something shift in his expression. The intensity in his eyes changed from supportive partner to something colder, more calculating. Whatever Reed was saying, whether it was about deserving his own opportunities or about being ready to step out of anyone's shadow, it triggered something in Bron. Reed then made what turned out to be a critical mistake in judgment. He turned to Bron and, in what seemed like a gesture of partnership and unity, asked Bron to hand him the championship, not to challenge for it, but to hold it up together as a symbol of their dominance and partnership. Bron looked at the championship, then at Reed, and for a moment the arena fell silent with anticipation. Slowly, Bron removed the championship from his shoulder and appeared to extend it toward Reed. But as Reed reached for it, Bron pulled it back. The crowd's reaction was immediate confusion mixed with anticipation that something was wrong. Reed's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. He asked Bron what the problem was, why he was hesitating to share this symbolic moment. And that's when Bron struck. In one explosive motion, Bron swung the Universal title like a weapon, smashing the solid metal plate directly into Bronson Reed's face. The impact was sickening. You could hear the collision of metal on skull throughout the arena. Reed staggered backward, clearly dazed by the unexpected shot, blood immediately beginning to flow from his forehead where the championship had connected. The crowd erupted gasps, shock, and the beginning of boos as they processed what they were witnessing. This wasn't a wrestling move or a competitive action, this was a betrayal, an attack from behind the guise of partnership. But Bron wasn't finished. Not even close. As Reed stumbled, trying to process what had just happened and defend himself, Bron tossed the championship aside and began his assault in earnest. A devastating clothesline sent Reed crashing to the mat. Bron pulled him up and delivered a brutal German suplex, showcasing the explosive power that makes him so dangerous. What made this attack particularly brutal was Bron's systematic approach. He wasn't wildly attacking in a moment of rage, he was methodically dismantling his former partner, targeting specific body parts to inflict maximum damage. Brutal kicks to Reed's ribs, targeting the midsection. Vicious strikes to the head and neck area. Each blow was calculated to hurt, to injure, to make a statement. Bron positioned Reed in the corner and delivered a series of shoulder tackles, each one driving the air from Reed's lungs with devastating impact. The 330-pound Reed was being manhandled like a rag doll by his former partner, the size difference meaning nothing in the face of Bron's explosive power and the advantage of surprise. The most devastating moment came when Bron set up for his signature spear. He positioned Reed in the center of the ring, backed up to the corner, and then exploded forward with one of the most vicious spears anyone has ever seen. The impact folded Reed completely in half, his body crashing to the mat with tremendous force. The spear alone would have been sufficient to make a statement, but Bron still wasn't done. Bron picked Reed up, no easy feat given Reed's size, and delivered another spear. Then another. 3 total spears, each one more brutal than the last, each one driving home the message that this partnership was over and that Bron viewed Reed not as an equal partner but as an obstacle to be destroyed. Officials and referees finally flooded the ring, creating a barrier between Bron and the fallen Reed. Medical personnel rushed to attend to Bronson, who lay motionless in the center of the ring, blood covering his face from the initial championship shot, his body broken from the systematic assault. Bron stood in the corner, breathing heavily, the Intercontinental Championship clutched in his hand, his eyes fixed on the destruction he'd caused. There was no remorse in his expression, no second thoughts, only cold satisfaction that he'd made his statement in the most brutal way possible. As Bron finally exited the ring and walked up the ramp, he raised the championship high above his head, not in celebration, but in declaration. This was his championship, his show, his Raw, and anyone who thought they could share that spotlight, even a partner, had just learned exactly what happens when you challenge Bron Breakker's dominance. Wrestling Apocalypse, let's dive deep into the psychology behind Bron Breakker's decision to betray Bronson Reed, because understanding the why makes the storyline so much more compelling than just bad guy attacks good guy. Bron Breakker is a second-generation superstar from one of wrestling's most legendary families. That lineage brings enormous expectations and pressure. From the moment he arrived in WWE, Bron has been compared to his family members, expected to live up to a legacy of dominance and championship success. This creates a psychological framework where Bron must constantly prove himself, must constantly validate that he's not just succeeding because of his name but because of his own ability. The championship represents that validation for Bron. It's proof that he's succeeded on his own merits, that he's carved out his own identity in WWE. That championship isn't just a title, it's Bron's entire sense of self-worth and identity wrapped up in 10 pounds of metal and leather. When Bronson Reed began talking about his own championship aspirations, when he started positioning himself as deserving equal recognition and opportunities, Bron's psychological framework perceived this as a threat. From Bron's perspective, Reed wasn't just asking for opportunities, he was threatening to diminish what made Bron special, what separated him from just being part of a team. There's also the element of control and dominance that defines Bron's character. Throughout his career, Bron has been the dominant force, the alpha, the one in control, the one dictating terms. The partnership with Reed worked as long as Bron felt he was the clear leader, the one calling the shots. But as Reed became more vocal about his own ambitions and started asserting himself more, Bron's need for control was threatened. The moment Reed asked to hold the title, even just symbolically, even just as a gesture of partnership, that crossed a line in Bron's mind. In his psychological framework, the championship is his and his alone. Sharing it, even symbolically, represented a loss of control and identity that Bron couldn't tolerate. What makes Bron's betrayal particularly chilling is how calculated it was. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision made in anger or frustration. The attack was systematic, methodical, designed to inflict maximum physical and psychological damage. Bron had clearly been thinking about this, planning it, waiting for the right moment to strike. From a character development perspective, this betrayal reveals that Bron Breakker is willing to sacrifice anything: friendship, loyalty, partnership to maintain his position and protect his championship. This makes him an incredibly dangerous heel because his motivation isn't money, power, or general evil, it's protection of his identity and status, which means he'll go to any lengths to defend it. The use of the championship belt as the initial weapon was symbolically perfect. Bron was quite literally using the thing he's protecting to destroy the perceived threat to it. This visual storytelling communicated everything about Bron's motivations without needing extensive verbal explanation. There's also an interesting psychological dynamic around insecurity masked as dominance. Bron's attack on Reed could be interpreted as a sign of insecurity. If Bron were truly secure in his championship and his position, Reed's ambitions wouldn't threaten him. The fact that he felt the need to brutally remove Reed from the equation suggests that on some level, Bron feared that Reed actually could challenge him successfully, either for the championship or for the spotlight. This complexity makes Bron a far more interesting villain than a one-dimensional "I'm evil and like hurting people" character. He's a dominant champion whose insecurities and need for control drive him to betray the people closest to him. That's compelling psychological storytelling that gives depth to both the character and the feud that will inevitably follow. Now let's discuss Bronson Reed's position coming out of this brutal betrayal. Because wrestling Apocalypse, Reed has instantly transformed from dominant monster to sympathetic victim in the most dramatic way possible. Bronson Reed entered this partnership in good faith. He was a loyal partner who watched Bron's back, supported his championship reign, and contributed equally to their dominance as a team. Reed did everything right from a partnership perspective. He was reliable, dominant in the ring, and presented a united front with Bron against all challengers. Reed's only crime was having ambition. He wanted championship opportunities, wanted recognition for his individual excellence, and wanted to be seen as more than just Bron Breakker's partner. These are legitimate, understandable goals for any competitive athlete. Reed never challenged Bron directly, never attacked him or disrespected him. He simply expressed that he deserved his own opportunities. For that ambition, Reed was brutally attacked and betrayed by the person he trusted most on the Raw roster. This creates instant and powerful sympathy for Reed's character. The WWE Universe understands betrayal. Everyone has experienced being stabbed in the back by someone they trusted. Reed's situation taps into that universal experience and makes him immediately sympathetic regardless of how his character was positioned before. The physical nature of the attack also generates sympathy. Reed was blindsided with a championship belt shot to the face, then systematically demolished with multiple spears and power moves. He didn't have a chance to defend himself, didn't see it coming, was completely vulnerable in the moment of betrayal. This wasn't a competitive fight, it was an assault. From a character perspective, Reed now has the most powerful motivation in wrestling: personal revenge. This isn't about championships anymore. This is about making Bron Breakker pay for the betrayal, for the humiliation, for the physical assault, and for destroying what could have been a legendary partnership. Reed's size and power make him a credible threat for revenge. At 330 pounds, with his combination of strength and agility, Reed can legitimately threaten anyone on the roster, including Bron. The WWE Universe will believe that when Reed gets his hands on Bron, he has the physical tools to inflict serious damage in return. The contrast in how this happened is also important for Reed's character. He was speaking about partnership and dominance when he was attacked. He was in a vulnerable position, trusting his partner, not expecting betrayal. This makes the attack feel more cowardly and heinous from Bron's side, which further elevates Reed's sympathetic position. What's particularly effective about Reed's position is that he can maintain his physical presence and intimidating demeanor while adding the sympathetic element of being wronged. He doesn't need to become a traditional underdog babyface who overcomes odds through heart alone. He's a monster who was betrayed and now has righteous anger fueling his desire for revenge. Reed's promos following this betrayal will be incredibly powerful. Imagine Reed talking about trust, about how he had Bron's back through everything, about how he helped Bron maintain his title, only to be rewarded with violence and betrayal. These promos will resonate with audiences because they're rooted in genuine emotional pain rather than generic "I want the title" rhetoric. The path forward for Reed is clear. He needs to make Bron Breakker suffer. Whether that's through attacking Bron during his matches, costing him the Intercontinental Championship, or eventually facing him in a brutal stipulation match, Reed's motivation is crystal clear and completely justified. Wrestling wildcards, this betrayal sets up what could be one of the most personal and physically intense rivalries Monday Night Raw has seen in years, and it completely transforms the landscape of the show. Let's break down where this is heading. The next few weeks of Raw will be absolutely critical for establishing the stakes and intensity of this rivalry. We should see, once he's medically cleared from the brutal attack, Reed's first appearance back will be massive. His promo explaining his feelings about the betrayal and his intentions for revenge will set the tone for this entire feud. Heel Bron will need to explain his actions, but not in an apologetic way. He'll likely double down, explaining that Reed was becoming a threat to his championship and his dominance, and that eliminating threats is what champions do. Before they have their first official match, we should see multiple backstage brawls, parking lot attacks, and chaotic confrontations that build the intensity and make their eventual match feel even more significant. The Universal title will obviously be central to this feud. Reed has every justification to demand a championship match. He helped Bron keep that title through their partnership, and now he wants to take it as the ultimate revenge. WWE could structure this several ways: grant Reed a championship opportunity quickly, capitalizing on the heat and emotion of the moment. Have Bron and WWE management force Reed to prove he deserves the opportunity, creating a series of qualifying matches or challenges that build anticipation. Have their first encounter be non-title to settle the personal issue, with the championship match coming later as the feud continues. Given the intensity and personal nature of this rivalry, standard wrestling matches won't feel sufficient. This feud demands extreme stipulations, the most obvious choice, allowing both men to use weapons and settle this without restrictions. Taking the battle throughout the arena and backstage, symbolically bringing the fight to where this betrayal occurred. Trapping both men inside, ensuring no escape and a definitive conclusion. The ultimate test of who's truly more dominant, where the only way to win is to completely incapacitate your opponent. Allowing the fight to spill everywhere, showing that this rivalry can't be contained in just the ring. Several compelling directions exist for how this rivalry could play out: the ultimate revenge, taking the title that Bron protected so viciously. This would create a new dynamic where Bron must chase while Reed stands triumphant with what Bron valued most. Bron might keep the championship but suffer such a brutal beating that his dominance is questioned, opening doors for other challengers. They could trade victories and even the championship back and forth over several months, creating an epic rivalry that defines this era of Raw. Other superstars could get involved, either siding with Reed out of sympathy or aligning with Bron for strategic reasons, expanding the feud beyond just two men. This betrayal transforms Monday Night Raw's entire ecosystem. With their partnership dissolved, the dominance they maintained over the roster is gone, creating opportunities for other tag teams and singles competitors to rise. Other superstars might approach Reed as potential allies against Bron, or vice versa, creating new faction dynamics. With Bron focused on Reed and vice versa, the Intercontinental Championship picture becomes more unpredictable, with other contenders potentially inserting themselves into the situation. Raw's tone will shift toward more personal, intense rivalries rather than just competitive matches, potentially influencing how other feuds are structured. This is the kind of storyline that elevates everyone involved and creates must-see television week after week. When you have two physically dominant performers with legitimate in-ring skills and a deeply personal storyline driving their conflict, you have all the ingredients for an unforgettable rivalry. Wrestling Apocalypse: Bron Breakker's betrayal of Bronson Reed is the kind of shocking, brutal moment that reminds us why we love professional wrestling. This isn't just about moves and matches, it's about trust, betrayal, ambition, and the lengths people will go to protect what they value most. The partnership that dominated Monday Night Raw has exploded in spectacular fashion, and the collision course these two former partners are now on promises to deliver some of the most intense, physical, and emotionally charged wrestling we'll see all year. Bron has declared himself the ruthless champion who will destroy anyone threatening his position, while Reed has every justification for wanting to make Bron suffer for this betrayal. This is wrestling storytelling at its finest: complex motivations, shocking moments, and a clear path forward that has us all desperate to see what happens next. What do you think? Wrestling Apocalypse. Did you see this betrayal coming, or were you completely shocked? Is Bron justified in protecting his championship at all costs, or did he cross an unforgivable line? Who walks away victorious when these two finally settle this? Will Reed get his revenge, or will Bron prove he was right to eliminate the threat? Drop all your thoughts, predictions, and reactions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you're subscribed to Wrestling Apocalypse and hit that notification bell so you never miss our analysis. Smash that like button, share this with every wrestling fan you know, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep it wild.